Hi, this speaker is not doing anything to let you hear me better. It's only for the recording that Joe's making. So that's why I'm holding this. So welcome. I'm Jeanette White, for those of you who don't know me. I'm one of the 2 senators from Windham County. And this, let me give you just a little bit of background here. This really isn't a Senate committee meeting, although I am on the committee that's looking at this issue. But it's kind of being sponsored by myself, by the Vermont Cannabis Collaborative, and by Vermont Homegrown. We're kind of collaborating on doing this. So there are many people here to thank for putting this together. I'm going to let Vermont Cannabis Collaborative speak for itself when the time comes, but I want to give you just a little bit of background. About 5 years ago, I attended a meeting here with just a few people that was talking about legalization, decriminalization, the Vermont way. There weren't anywhere near as many people as there are here now, and nor were there as many people who I heard on the street saying, yes, it's time, we've got to do it. So I think the momentum is growing. In my opinion, it's inevitable that it's going to happen, but if it's going to happen, my concern anyway is that it happen the Vermont way, which is kind of hard to define clearly, but for many of us it means small, local, and keeping control of it. So we have an agenda, a long-term agenda, which is legalizing the Vermont way. Then we have an agenda for tonight. And the agenda for tonight will be we'll have about a 15-minute presentation by Vermont Cannabis Collaborative. We'll have other ideas come forward. And then we just want to have a general discussion here. The goal of this meeting is to get people talking and to help us figure out what we should do when we start writing the regulations. I should tell you that my committee, I chair government operations, Senate government operations. It has nothing to do with marijuana, nothing whatsoever. But the newest member of my committee calls it the surprise a day committee, because he never knows what we're going to be tackling. And what happened was that when we did the dispensaries, it seemed that no other committee wanted to do dispensaries because it was too problematic, too emotional, too controversial. So my committee took it, and we did it. And while we have some problems with the dispensaries and with the program, we do have a good program, I believe. And I know there are issues that need to be resolved, but I think we have a good program. So this year, you probably know there is a bill S95, which was introduced by Senator Zuckerman, and it is a legalization bill. We did not take testimony on that, but what happened is that the administration paid the Rand Corporation a fair amount of money to do a study on legalization in Vermont and the options. My feeling was that that was probably going to sit on a shelf someplace because people weren't going to pay attention to it because
It didn't need to come off. It never should have been written.
Well, I disagree with that. I think it was a good study. I think it gave a lot of options. I think it didn't say what we should do, but it gave many different options, and we need to choose what those options are. So our committee decided that we were going to look at that study, and we were going to continue looking at the issue. So we took, every Friday afternoon, we had testimony, not on a bill, but on just legalization the Vermont way. What does that mean, and what doesn't it mean? We probably took 50 hours of testimony, and we took that testimony from anybody who wanted to come and talk to us. We heard from the Vermont Cannabis Collaborative. We heard from law enforcement. We heard from people who went to Colorado. We heard from the administration. We heard from the prevention community. We heard from anybody who, we heard from patients who are registered now. We heard from the dispensaries. So we heard from everybody that wanted to come. That doesn't mean that everybody who wanted to say something did, because it's a long way to Montpelier for many people. But anyway, we took all that testimony, and what our plan is in November to write a bill to have ready for January. And we're not, Senator Zuckerman also testified to our committee about his bill, but we're not using his bill as a basis. We're going to do our own bill. And so sometime in November, we will begin drafting that bill. We're going to put all together, the ideas that come out of all these meetings and anything else that anybody wants to send to us. Let me think now. Yeah, okay, we're going to have a bill ready in January hopefully for passage this year. We know who our governor is right now. We don't know who our governor will be next year, but we know who our governor won't be next year. So we want this to pass this year. Because we're pretty sure, we know that our current governor supports this. So there are a lot of groups working on this. There's our committee, there's Vermont Cannabis Collaborative, there's Vermont Homegrown, there's the dispensaries, there's individual people, all kinds of people. There's the health department is doing what's called a health impact assessment to look at the impact, the health impact of legalization. They will have that ready for us in November. So that's a longer introduction than I meant to give, but that's okay. So you should never give a politician a microphone, even if it doesn't project their voice, because they'll always take advantage of it. So what happened is that the Vermont Cannabis Collaborative had a couple meetings. I went to one in Burlington. It was a very exciting meeting. There were a lot of people there. And I said, you need to get out across the state. You need to come down here and hear from people down here. And here they are. And what I'm going to do is introduce Hinda, who will then introduce Will. And I'm going to try to kind of moderate, because we don't want things to get out of hand. We don't want somebody to dominate the whole conversation. We don't want people to get emotional. Let me first say that this topic tonight is not, should we legalize or shouldn't we legalize? The topic is, if and when we legalize, how should we do it? Legalize and regulate. So the topic is not, should we or shouldn't we? I just wanted to make that clear. We made that clear in our committee meetings, and people were very good about abiding by that rule. So, Hinda Miller is, should I tell them your main claim to fame? Ms. Jogbra? Okay.
Thank you. So, my name is Hinda Miller, and I'm not a politician anymore, so I'll try and make it short. I was a colleague of Jeanette White, a senator for 10 years from Chittenden County, and my passion has always been economic development. And I'm here to introduce the Vermont Cannabis Collaborative. We're a group of entrepreneurs that live close by in Chittenden County, and we came together in November thinking that this cannabis, the reality of cannabis becoming legalized in Vermont is going to happen. And we see it as a wonderful job creator, prosperity for communities, and very much like the entrepreneurs that I see here, which was done by the strolling of the heifers, the business planning competition. All these young entrepreneurs, we see this legalization of cannabis as a way to recruit and retain our youth. And that's something we all came together with. So myself, I also was an entrepreneur, created jobs I was one of the co-founders of Jogbra for those women who are of my era who started running. We did a very important product and we created jobs. Will Rapp from the Intervale is one of the founding members, and he will tell you more about himself. He's really an icon for sustainable agriculture, coming a voice from Vermont. Part of our steering committee is Alan Newman. You know him as founder of Magic Hat, so he's also created jobs, and he has tremendous passion, all of us do, for the possibilities of job creation. Michael Jagger, who's a marketing, who did Burton Boards and other Xbox, etc. We have a lot of people, talented people, just like we have in this room, who are committed to come together, and our aspect really is job creation. So I'm a little sick today. I was the driver for Will, so Will said that he would take over, and I think we're going to do a presentation of maybe 10 minutes. Just get it out there, and then Jeanette can do her whatever she would like to do. So before I go, I just want to say, Jeanette has been there for years, longer than I. She and I co-sponsored, I think, were on the bill for medical marijuana. She has continually been a voice for this issue, and I think we have a lot we owe Jeanette. So let's get together and get the best ideas out.
Well, do you want to take questions as you go along? Would you like to do that?
Yeah, happy to.
Do that?
Yeah, that's a good
Whatever
idea.
you
Sure.
want.
So my business is called, one of the businesses I started is called Gardner Supply in Burlington. The first week I was in business, someone came into our little warehouse in Winooski and brought in a wallet full of dollar bills saying, I'd like to buy some things. And I said, great. What would you like to buy? And he proceeded to buy grow lights and fertilizer and organic soil mix. And I said, could I have your name, please? Because we were a mail order business and I wanted to be able to mail him my catalog. No. We don't share our names. So that was 33 years ago. At some level, my business has been in the legal side of the cannabis sales business, selling organic products so that people could grow their own whatevers. And we always knew that there was a business opportunity out there. We also, probably most of the people in this room know that it is a very tenuous kind of business opportunity to pursue, particularly due to federal laws. And a lot of what I'm going to talk about today is the fact that there's a sea change of possibilities emerging right now that allows the development of not only Gardner Supply Company offering products to allow people to grow medicinal marijuana at home in 23 states, for example, in a relatively legal framework. You have to be cautious still. But my attorney over the last years has gone from don't touch it to maybe you can touch it, to touch it a little bit. So I'm getting closer to being able to touch this. I don't specifically want to talk about that business opportunity. Rather, I want to talk about the idea of system change and how economic development can transform if you think systematically about it. So I've been involved with multiple sectors of the Vermont economy trying to figure out how we could access what is the Vermont way, what is unique about Vermont, as we also build businesses that create jobs across the state. The things that I've been involved with were primarily the local food system. So I started the Intervale Center in Burlington, which became a catalyst in northern Vermont for now hundreds of farms that got started and began to move toward the state recognizing they should partner with this economic development opportunity. So what they created was called Farm to Plate. Farm to Plate is a food system change strategy looking at how we go from X amount of our food and calories grown and consumed in Vermont to 2X, to 3X, to 4X. The same thing happened with the project that I was involved with starting called Energy Action Now, which is how do we get 90% of our energy produced from renewable sources by 2050? That is now embedded in state thinking and state policy. I also was involved in a business, seventh generation. You probably know that business. It started at Gardner Supply. It was sort of the green products business. A lot of businesses followed that through. But in each of these cases, there was the concept of an emergent market, a need for a strategic approach, creating access points and cohesive value chain in the whole economic development strategy. That's where we are with the cannabis world today, it seems to me. So, Hinda mentioned that some of us came together, some of us have been involved with this for a long time, some of us are more recent to it, but the idea is just like with local food, just like with green products, just like with renewable energy, if we scale ourselves to think systematically about this, we can create something special. So, welcome. Our mission and vision as a business. I'm going to spend a couple minutes on this. Our mission is to create common sense commerce. How do we approach, and ultimately it's really going to be the legislature who defines the framework we can operate within. We hope we can encourage that framework to be as optimizing as possible for as many people and as many businesses as possible to be involved in this in a Vermont way. That's what we mean by common sense commerce. Stimulating greater opportunity the Vermont way. The vision. I grew up in California. California is a center of chaos as it relates to cannabis. They're trying to figure it out. They might get there, they might not. But since then, we've got a more cohesive approach in Washington, in Colorado, in Alaska, in Oregon, but still not as coordinated as it might be. Why? Because it was initiated by a popular proposition as opposed to a legislative process where some of the logic and connection points could be created. We have the opportunity to be, I think, the first, right, Jeanette? Yes. The first legislature to actually take all the input and craft a strategy that makes a lot more sense. We also have the opportunity to be a leader or the leader on the East Coast. That is important because there's an establishment of a rootedness, of a position that if you do it well and you create a artisanal high-value approach to it, we can actually become the center of excellence for this industry that has been invisible for a long time and is now about to become visible. So our goal is to become the East Coast Center of Excellence, supporting a thriving business culture, just like we have done with renewable energy, with food systems, with green products. Those are the people involved. Hinda already mentioned those. I'm going to go by these. I'm going to spend some time on this, because when you say there is a job creation, business development opportunity, when you look at a sector, particularly a sector that doesn't even exist visibly and legally right now, and all of a sudden we authorize it, the legislation authorizes something to be created, you have a lot of opportunities. But to do that really well, with excellence, you have more opportunities. And those opportunities are the exact kind of opportunities that Vermont thrives on. It's like our craft beer industry, our artisanal cheese industry, our maple syrup industry, our organic vegetable industry. We can't do commodity stuff well, but we can do high quality artisanal niche stuff very well. That is an expertise Vermont has. So, as it relates to new business opportunities, I hope that we have not 3 or 10 or 30, but hundreds of businesses that can actually be involved in the production of cannabis once legal. I also hope that we have a piece of the authorization that allows home growing to happen. I've serviced home growing for a long time, and to do it visibly and well, organically, so that people can really be successful would be a great addition to the 2 retail stores that I operate in Chittenden County, in terms of that kind of an expertise if we could share it. Research. Cannabis is a weed, but it's an amazing weed. And it's got an amazing history, an amazing legacy, an amazing ethnobotanical background to it. We don't know anything about it because we haven't been allowed to research it. What if the University of Vermont was allowed to do research on this? What if Vermont Technical College was allowed to do technical training on this? What if we really had our medical community understanding how this crop could be beneficial to an array of disabilities that exist in Vermont? That research also needs a whole certification, diagnostics, and laboratory function behind it. I don't know how that's one of the licenses you've proposed. That makes a whole lot of sense. But let's maybe do it the way Nevada does it, which is they allow private businesses to start these labs and these certifications, but they have a very strong state auditing, oversight, and an analytical framework to make sure that quality standard is achieved. Regional centers of excellence. This is not something we want to concentrate in one part of the state. We want to figure out how to distribute that, but you also want to do it with an approach that gives people confidence in the quality, in the selection, in the processed product, so that we don't get into some of the challenges that Colorado has had about if we are authorizing edibles, that there's a clarity about the quality and the dosage. Tourism. We are losing right now skiers to Colorado. And no?
Actually, there's 6 dealers at Stratton, I understand, in the wintertime covering everybody.
Yeah, and up where I live, there's smoking snooze.
So
I'm not talking about it anymore.
okay. So I'm just saying that there are some number of people who come to Vermont for our tourism assets. And we want to be able to compete with Alaska and Colorado and California to some degree. How do we do that? In such a way that we are giving people a high quality experience in the whole tourism world. How do we do that so that we might actually be able to recognize the Vermont leadership and legacy over 50 years of growing different kinds of strains in our particular climate in a unique way? That's all information that becomes fodder to attract people here. Financial services. If you ran one of the dispensaries in Vermont, one of the 4 dispensaries, you would have been jerked around multiple times about who will do your banking services for you. Fortunately, right now, the Vermont State Credit Employees Union, Credit Union, has figured out a way within the federal regulatory framework to provide services to our dispensaries now. But it's not easy. There will be the opportunity for banks to engage in this new industry, and smart banks or smart credit unions will take a leadership position in this and capture market share. Ancillary businesses. I'm working with 2 businesses in Vermont. One is a controlled environment agriculture business, which essentially in a greenhouse or in another kind of a grow operation, how do you make sure you have the right amount of heat and light and carbon dioxide and other things? There's someone developing a cloud-based, very simple, low-cost system for that. There's another company in Vermont that's working on LED lighting, a much more efficient way to do indoor lighting. There's business opportunities in Vermont for that. Medical, we probably mostly understand what's going on in the whole medical marijuana world here, but leave it be said that we have a very small fraction of the potential being realized right now. And how we get more people access to cannabis as a medicine is a core question I think we need to address. Agriculture diversification. I've been involved for a lot of years trying to help more farms become viable economically. If we could unleash into many, many of those farms the opportunity for cannabis to become a crop that they could add to their other crops as another diversification step, that would be an enhancement of the Vermont leadership that already exists in local agriculture. Education. I walked Hind and I parked over here. We walked by the Vermont Technical College. I guess there's a Brattleboro operation here. And Hind and I met with Dan Smith, the president of Vermont Tech, a couple weeks ago. If we could create a cohesive industry framework in Vermont that allowed people, that encouraged people to get involved with the growing, the extraction, the processing, the research, the laboratory sides of this business, there would be many, many new jobs. Vermont Technical College could actually, they have a sustainable horticulture department there. Cool. That ought to be really an attractive thing for kids. 12 students. It's about to die. This is an example of a kind of a curriculum that could be added to that, where there are clear job opportunities upon leaving if we get the industry framework right. So those are just a smattering of what already exists in Vermont about business potential in this new industry. You probably are mostly aware of this. Hinda and Jeanette have been involved with many of these pieces, but the history of the process toward, the march toward legalization in Vermont includes various medical marijuana bills, leading to the 2010 bill, and then the decriminalization, and then the passage of allowing industrial hemp to be grown, and then the opening of the dispensaries. So in some ways, just as this is happening across the US, there's a set of steps in process leading to an outcome. We have the opportunity in Vermont for that outcome to be thoughtfully created as a whole system within a legislative process with all of us citizens providing input to that process. There was a lot more chaos in all the other legalization that has happened heretofore. This is about Vermont, and I don't want to go over, this is just stuff we've been doing as Vermont Cannabis Collaborative. And what I'll end with is, it's time to get creative about how we do this. I've talked with a few of you before the meeting, the homegrown.
Talk to Stuart there.
Who's Stuart?
Stuart's right there. I'm here.
Stuart. So, great. How do we engage what your policy or your goals or your framework is in this whole process? We don't have any particular need for an outcome except the optimization of job creation, business development, and an understanding of how to create an industry that's as healthy as possible. So that's about understanding demand, supply, pricing, taxation, regulation, testing, all of those pieces. That's what the legislature has to work on. And we have some ideas from a standpoint of how to create the most cohesive, successful industry, which we hope to input into the legislative process. But the outcome, and someone talked about the Rand report. I thought the Rand report was really good in terms of providing a framework of understanding. Well, I can think that. Thank you. I thought it was really good at helping me, not being an expert on the macroeconomics of this, understand not only what the current demand is in Vermont, but also the array from total free market legalization to total criminalization. There's an array of choices there. And the beauty of that report to me was you're not bound by anything but your own creativity, right? So what do we want to create in Vermont? How do we want to do it? I think we want to do it so that it's optimized for the Vermont benefit, for Vermonters' benefit, so that it's distributed as a economic development opportunity broadly, so that we can create a excellence framework to what we're trying to do. So that's why I'm involved with this. I see it as the next interesting industry for Vermont to take leadership around that trades on a lot of the skills and values and capacity that Vermont already has. Okay. Questions?
No, I think that if you have questions about this or anything else maybe let's ask questions about the VCC approach first, and see if people have questions or concerns about that and how it, sure.
Oh, just one. I was looking at the makeup of your steering committee, and I also have read the RAND report, which I'm of the opinion I thought was great and balanced. But one thing when you're talking about systems change and policy changes, there are some health outcomes that we don't want, for especially vulnerable populations,
Yes.
which were mentioned in the RAND
Yes.
report. And I'm wondering, as you develop policy and systems changes, it would be really nice to see a doctor or a pediatrician on your steering committee. It would be nice to see how that fits into.
So one thing I didn't say is that we have 4 study committees. One of those is about youth education, safety, and prevention. We do have doctors on that committee. So this is a steering committee. Also, every doctor doesn't want to have his face on that kind of a brochure, right? So one of the things we're fighting is the allowance for people to be visible. But we do have people on this committee, and this committee is working with the Department of Public Health Assessment Initiative.
It's a process that they go through whenever they're looking at the health impact on a policy change. They are looking at
And I would say, while we are trying to advance a coherent industry, we recognize there are real safety issues and real education issues and real vulnerable population issues. But my answer to that when someone asks about that is, what % of youth started to use cannabis in Colorado once it was legalized? And it was almost negligible. The people that were using it were already using it. So why don't we try and figure out how to provide a good education framework and understanding of what they're doing and what the risks are of doing that. Out it, essentially. Make it visible, essentially. Which is how I respond to that.
Can I just suggest that there are some chairs up here, if those of you, Daryl, who are standing back there want to come and sit down over here, you're welcome to do it. There are 6 chairs up here right now, so feel free. Sorry.
Well,
Yeah.
one of the things, Fringe, one of the things that we're dealing with the health department, and dealt with this person, is trying to get them to at least open up the idea and change the rhetoric. The rhetoric is stale, it's old, it's not scientifically accurate. We get I'm a medical patient. As a medical patient, you get a form every time to renew. And I basically had to call them up and ask Lindsay Wells what they were doing, and then I had to go to the health department and see if we could get that rewritten. Because the health department is really locked in to believing the rhetoric that's 75 years old we discussed.
Can I just respond to that?
Sure.
When that piece came out, it was given to me, and I was appalled at the way it was written. And I talked to Dixie Henry and Barbara Samaglio both, and they suggested that they were open to rewriting it, and they had given the invitation to the dispensaries to help them rewrite it, and I said that I would try and facilitate that. I have to admit that I haven't done that yet. I was busy at the end of the session, and I just have not done that, but I will make sure that that gets done.
We interfaced with them, and we rewrote it for them in a way that would be logical and scientific, and the lady that I was dealing with was very interested, but I'm not sure her boss was.
Okay.
I think that's the issue.
I'll make sure that happens. It may not be your,
No, I rewrote it.
This lady's a medical
I know, I'm just saying that it may not be
It
what,
doesn't have to be mine, ma'am.
right. I'm just saying that I will make sure that I will facilitate getting this rewritten in a better, less inflammatory way.
So, hi there. I noticed a lot of the founders are founded B Corps, and I'd like to hear
Founding benefit
Yes,
corporations?
and I'm interested to hear on what kind of alternative business structures.
Great question. Yeah, great question. I mean, David Zuckerman's S95 did suggest, I believe, B Corps. Now, B Corp, that's the certified B Corp. There's a B Corp, and then there's a benefits corporation. I think we in Vermont should be looking at using the Vermont law, which is a Vermont Benefits Corporation, LLC, as the framework that we encourage businesses that get licenses to use. The reason I think that is corporations were originally chartered to be serving the common good. We've gotten away from that. We ought to try and figure out how to get back to that. And the Benefits Corporation encourages that because it has certain audit standards, it has certain transparency standards, and it's going to dissuade big money capital from coming here opening up a business. If we said you have to be a benefits corporation, you could figure out how to operate within that guideline, but it still is a level of visibility that a lot of capital would not flow toward. So I think we should be a benefits corporation LLC, is what I would recommend.
Yeah, I'm Stuart Sable. I'd like to question some of your initial assumptions, if I may. One is the RAND Corporation. I think the report's okay. I don't think it's good. It leaves out the fact that there is an existing economy. It says nothing about where it comes from. It assumes that all cannabis in Vermont comes from some kind of evil underground. But the fact is that a lot of the cannabis in Vermont, I don't know what percentage, comes from local people growing it, and it's some of the best in the world. And to reinvent the wheel and say, now we're going to teach people how to do it and start it anew is, in a sense, throwing away the baby with water. You know, we ought to recognize that and promote that. What we really need to do is to promote that and then come up with a distribution system.
Okay.
Well, small people can grow. Let me just finish up a little bit. Maine I learned from some people in Maine last summer, and there's an idea that everybody can have, say, a 10 by 10 plot. Now the numbers are, and that's what you have a right to grow. At that point, you can share it and give it away, but you can't sell it. And that was in the committee for a while, and then it went away. And Jeanette and I have talked about that a little bit. But the primary idea was that that's a unit. And as someone gets bigger, they can buy more 10 by 10 units, and the price remains the same. If you buy 3 so that you have a 10 by 30 foot space, you pay X number of dollars, maybe 100, maybe 1,000 for each additional one. But if you want 10,000 square feet, then you also have to pay the same price. So it really...
The same price as 10 feet?
Same price per unit.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah, I think that's- yeah.
so that we're not...
So let me ask you a question.
So we're not backing big agriculture.
I've not backed big agriculture my whole life. But let me just ask you a question. Do you think the 30 to 50,000 pounds that Rand projected is used in Vermont is accurate?
That I don't know.
Okay.
I suspect that it's a little high, quite frankly.
Okay.
But also, I think that, we talk about people driving up from somewhere else and giving it, selling it on the street.
Yeah.
And a lot of what I've seen is it's grown locally.
Right.
And we really should not reinvent the wheel. We should really be talking about an effective way to promote local people growing. And the state should be thinking about distribution, research, and that kind of thing.
Where do you get the money for the state to be thinking about distribution, research,
Well,
and excellence?
that's an issue, and that is a problem.
Okay, so it's not a problem.
I think in terms of money, the idea that we take from restaurants and tourist areas is an end tax, a room and meals tax, a sales tax, and I think that should be the only tax, the retail tax, and licensing income on the other end. But if you tax every step, there's no way that you can compete with black market. Parallel. No, black market. There is a parallel market, and what we want to do is eliminate people coming up and selling things from out of state. That's the black market. We have a parallel market that can eliminate that, and I'm confident that could supply the whole state as it exists.
Fine.
I really am.
Yeah.
Without a bunch of warehouses under lights consuming electricity.
Yeah, so,
I just know that with the 3 dispensaries, it's been 2 years and they still can't produce enough pot for 1,700. So I don't think they go with the answer.
No,
I had something, no, Jeanette, let me finish. I am a patient. I grow more than I can use. I am now taking care of 11 patients, better than the damn dispensaries. I make oil for cancer patients, the dispensaries don't. That is medical marijuana. We have 3 grow operators. We do not have a medical dispensary in this state. They have no information, they have no medicine.
I'm sorry, I disagree.
Can I just, I think that the goal of the committee and the goal of the legalization,
Please read this.
Let me tell you what I think.
no, wait,
My reason why.
can
Read
we,
this and then tell me that the
Just-
dispensaries are doing a
just-
good
no.
job, please.
The dispensaries are doing a good job for some people. They're not serving everybody's needs, and we know very well that there need to be changes. But please,
In 2
can we
years-
keep this, can we keep this
2
civil?
years. All I'm trying to point out is that large
Yes.
growers are not the answer.
Excuse me, the goal of the committee, and I believe the goal of the Vermont Cannabis Collaborative, is not to encourage large growers. It is to, when we talked about the Vermont way, that's exactly what we were talking about. Local people growing in local areas and keeping it small. We are looking at putting a cap on the size of a cultivation facility that you can have, so you can't have somebody coming in. Well, I just heard the other day of somebody in Killington who wants to become the supplier for the whole state. It's not going to happen. It's not going to happen because we're going to put a cap on it. And I think that, I actually disagree with you, Stuart, about the Rand report. I think they did acknowledge that there is an economy built up around it in Vermont, and part of the goal is to bring that economy into the sunshine instead of having it have to be a parallel economy, is to make people who are currently growing legal. I don't think there's any indication that we want to shut down any
Pardon me, but
local
there is
economy.
nothing about containment and control. Kevin Sabat and Bo Kilmer that isn't anything about cannabis legalization across the board. If you read the entire Rand report
I did.
and you listened, control and containment, and they are known as a conservative think tank. No, wait. I am not done, sir. Time out. You had your chance. Give me more.
Okay, let's keep this.
Wait a minute. Hold the phone, man. You know, it's real simple. Y'all went out and found out the most God-blessed, conservative, warmongering group to contain and control our activities, who are known publicists of this kind of stuff. And you're trying to tell me that's the best you can do when we had no word, no say of who was even going to study this for us. And we get the God-blessed Nazis, the pot Nazis, the control people,
Okay.
the warmongers, and that's who you want to bring in? Yeah.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Thank you.
I want
You
to
can.
bring this back
Okay,
to,
thank you.
we don't have any answers. We're trying to listen and encourage the best input we can. I will say, I have a medical card. I work with the VPA dispensary in Montpelier.
So do I. I supply them with those
Okay.
plants.
And if you know them, they're
They need-
medically expert and they're botanically expert,
Yes,
and they're
and
learning as fast as they can.
And I mean,
So they're offering.
Excuse me.
I just-
Tone down over here, please.
If you can show me one other dispensary, one other grow operation in the United States where they move the plants up and down instead of the lights up and down, I will agree. But until then, Vermont Patients Alliance would, I love the people dearly, as I say, I've helped them. But there's some basics to growing cannabis that these people still haven't grasped. There's no reason why these people with the facilities they have can't produce what they need for the patient.
So they, as of Monday, they open the first organic greenhouse operation in Vermont. A high-quality operation that, with one of the best growers that I know in Vermont as their guide. So they're trying to learn as they can within the framework of what they're allowed to do.
Are you referring to Ben as the best grower that you know?
No, he's not the grower. This guy has been 35 years been growing organic tomatoes. So,
Jonathan,
Have you
you had
thought
a-
about dropping tourists from your pie chart and just limiting buyers to residents of Vermont?
I'm sorry?
He asked about limiting buyers to residents of Vermont and not doing tourists. One of the things that when we were looking at regulation, I can speak to regulation, I can't speak to the economics of it, that's what Will is doing, but when we talked to there's something called the Cole memo, which came from the DEA, and when we looked at the regulation and legalization, what we looked at was how to stay within their guidelines, and one of the guidelines says to limit the over the state transport of it. I can't think of the word now, it just went right out of my head. Interstate, but that wasn't, anyway. So what we did is we think it might be, have a constitutional challenge if we didn't let people from out of state actually purchase if you have a retail facility and you don't let anybody from out of state purchase, there might be a constitutional challenge. So what our suggestion...
There are states that do that with fireworks.
You can buy fireworks.
There are states that do that.
Okay, I'm just telling you what our legal advice is telling us and what we're looking at, the questions that we're looking at. We have not come to any conclusions yet, any decisions. So if you have suggestions for us, please make them, but make them in a civil manner, please. So, Jonathan, what we've suggested is that perhaps a Vermont resident could buy 1 ounce, because that's what we've decriminalized right now. That an out-of-state resident could purchase a ½ ounce. Now we can't control them going around and buying many ½ ounces, but all we can do is say that we're following the advice of the Cole memo, that buy ½ ounce.
If I want to grow my own, can I
Grow
buy-
your own.
Can I buy seeds from you? Where am I going to get the seeds?
Great question.
Well, those are details that will have to be worked out. You can go to Gardener's Supply and buy the seeds if it's legal.
Not yet. Not yet. I mean, it's a great question because right now genetics can be not so much bought and sold, but they are accessible within a state jurisdiction. Less so across state lines.
Yeah.
So I think that's a really, I think it's a really good question. I'm appreciative of the Vermont legacy of great cannabis growers and great cannabis genetics. I think that's one of the things we ought to optimize here. And how we make that available for people in Vermont more readily than it is now would be a really good outcome. Whether or not that goes beyond, I don't know.
Hopefully we'll be able to have a seed company.
There, we have a question back here.
Jeanette, I was going to ask you, your bill that you're going to bring up, would you allow, this is not for medical use, but would you allow citizens of this state to grow their own, at home to use, not to sell, but to use for their own benefit?
Yes. I should have mentioned this before, and you can look at what the framework is that we're suggesting up to this point. There's a lot of detail in it. There's a lot of detail that still needs to be put in. But if you go to the legislative website and go to the Senate Government Operations website, the committee website, and just do a document search for marijuana, the framework will come up. And yes, personal growth and use is allowed. Once money changes hands, it's a different story.
Can we compare that to Stewart's idea?
Yeah, I would like to finish what I was saying.
You mean the 10 by 10 as opposed to a
Well,
number of
just let him
plants?
tell it's his ideas,
But it sounds like you're getting into a level of detail that would be perfect
No.
to share with your legislators.
Just let me finish a little bit. And that's that, people have been growing in a parallel economy for a long time. And like you said, and I agree with it, what we have to do is we have to change that paradigm. You know, so that people who have been growing and want to be legal can change the way they do it. And that's a mental change, it's a social change. It has a lot to do with people not coming here and talking because they don't want to be seen, much like the doctors that we were talking about. And one way to do that, and I'm not saying it's the only way, but it's a way that stayed with the committee for a while and was changed, and I know Jeanette disagrees with me, and that's that if we go with a size parcel, which is a unit, then people are no longer carrying buckets into the woods. They're no longer growing on the edges of fields. They can be out in the open, and that changes the mindset. That changes how it works. As long as you have a plant count, it's the same social mindset.
So just like.
Whereas agriculture is, you do it in the
Can I just
field.
understand what your proposal is? Is it a square footage or
Yeah.
number of plants?
It's a square foot.
Square footage.
It's a canopy square footage. The amount you can grow in a canopy is pretty well the same. You can have a lot of little plants or some big plants. If you do a plant count, you can grow a phenomenal amount with 6 plants, much more than you can with a 10 by 10 canopy. But it's the amount, you're in agriculture, you understand that. It's the size of the grow that counts, not the number of plants.
Actually, Stuart, I do agree with you, and I suggested a 10 by 10 plot, and that we use 10 by 10 as we go up the ladder for cultivation purposes. The committee was not ready to accept that, but we're going to hear more testimony on why a plot makes more sense, and since then I've had a lot of conversations with law enforcement about number of plants versus plots, and they actually like the plot idea. So
So I have a question, if I could, just 2 questions for you, really.
Yeah.
One is, I think in David Zuckerman's original legislation, he had proposed that half of whatever is allowed to be produced in Vermont will be produced by small growers. I don't know if, I think these were more like commercial farmers, small commercial farmers. I don't know if that also included homegrown or not. But do you have any sense of how to create the most vital industry? Because we're trying to scale this up such that you could both have homegrown and you could have smaller scale commercial as well as potentially larger scale commercial, if that is what's necessary to create the most dynamic industry.
The answer to that is yes, I have an outline, but not specific.
Yeah, so that's what we're trying to work on. We're trying to actually do an economic modeling of what might make sense. So if you say, I wanted 100% homegrown, that's the only thing that can be grown, that's one approach.
No, that's not what I'm saying.
I'm not saying you are. I'm just saying, but we could model it. We could model that versus we could model, there's homegrown, there's small commercial growers under a certain licensing program, and maybe there's larger growers who have to have that amount because they're doing edibles or something. So I don't know what the dynamics are, but one of the things we want to look at, we want to look at the macroeconomic reality as well as the micro of an enterprise. How do you help enterprises be successful? Because you don't want legislation that guarantees, like in Washington right now, half of them to fail because they didn't understand the supply and demand dynamics.
Well, what the people that are growing now want is they are successful, or they wouldn't still be there, even in the face of it being illegal. So that's a given. The other thing that I think that we really ought to consider is that locally, and I know that's true here and in other parts of the state, people use that money to pay taxes. Traditionally, they don't take that cash and buy on law. They spend it locally in stores. If that money goes to, say, half a dozen large dispensaries initially, that takes the money out of the communities. From the get-go, from the very beginning, it has to stay local. Otherwise, what happens is the local thing, we have to recreate it again. It's already here. Let's work on how we distribute it from local to retail.
If you look at the states with the dispensaries...
Sorry, this person over here had a... Go ahead.
Not to judge or cast generalizations, but I think I'm one of the fewer people in the room who I envision my future kids will be in elementary school and high school and entering the workforce in a legalized Vermont. And as a young person whose job it is to know about the workforce conditions in Southern Vermont, I love local, but we need job creation. And we need to be able to export this industry to a greater place than Southern Vermont if we want that job growth and if we want a vital economy for young people. And that's just a question I would like to put on this group, is to say what kind of Vermont economy do we want one to exist, downtown areas to exist for much longer, or do we want to continue the trend of being the second oldest state in the nation and with no young people to fill all the beautiful manufacturing?
That's one of the reasons why we came together, is we all have been involved in economic development for decades. We see the aging of our workforce, and one of the things we're really interested in, I don't care whether it's software development or renewable energy, what are the industries that are going to bring good paying jobs to Vermont? So the process of good paying jobs is partly what we're trying to figure out how to do. So if everything would be homegrown, you wouldn't have that. So there's some balance.
No, I would disagree with that.
I think that maybe I'm wrong here, but first of all, I'm going to make a light comment. That if we want to decrease the aging population in Vermont, Will and I will move to New Hampshire. That'll change the, I think that we're somehow looking at homegrown as not being a viable, if I'm a farmer right now, or not a farmer, but if I'm growing and I have this kind of parallel economy going here, I want to be able to continue to do that. But I want a legal way to sell it. So what we're talking about here is not getting rid of me, not getting rid of my ability to do that, but creating a legal outlet for me to sell.
Correct.
So that I don't have to sell only to my friends or only to people who my friends recommend, and run the risk that someday one of those friends that's recommended is going to be some undercover DEA agent. I'm not going to have to run that risk. So I think what we're looking at here is not getting rid of homegrown, but allowing those people who are now growing the ability to have a permit to sell on a retail basis. Anybody can continue to grow for their own use. But if you want to sell, you've got to have some kind of a legal permit. And I don't think that I don't think there's a tension here.
You could have a co-op.
Yeah, I don't disagree with that at all.
Well, I think we're creating a tension that isn't real.
Good reason.
But he's had his hand up for a long time, way back there.
On that thought of permitting, what are you looking at in terms of licensure right now? In terms of who would be able, costs? I'm just curious where the current thought is.
We haven't settled on any kind of costs yet at all, because the goal is to keep the cost low enough so that you're not doing what Colorado did, which is they're not getting rid of the underground market because their costs are too high. So we haven't looked at costs, but they would be very reasonable. We're looking at, right now we've been looking at 5 different permits or licenses. One is cultivator, one is retail, one is research and testing, one is production. So if you make creams, you get a production permit, and and one is wholesaler, and we're calling it wholesaler, but that sounds worse than it really is. But I'm a grower, he's a grower, and Stuart's a grower, but I don't want to load it into my car and bring it to the retailer. So you can get a wholesaler's permit and you can pick it up from all 3 of us and bring it to the retailer. Or I can do it myself, but there are people who aren't going to want to do that. So those are the permits that we're looking at right now.
One of the models, I mean, it really is their job to figure out what the permits is. One of the models that we're looking at is there something we could learn from the maple industry in terms of, because maple, they have small producers that aren't regulated, you can sell on your front porch. They have another scale up of a larger producer, and then they have another scale up of a larger producer. And maybe there's the cost goes up as you go up in your scale of production, so that scale is taxed more, for example. But we do have the maple syrup industry as a possible model. We have the Procter Maple Lab as an example of a place that tries to foster excellence and certification for that. So maybe we don't have to reinvent the wheel. Maybe there's a wheel already out there.
Can I just throw in two other things that we are suggesting along with the licensing? Is that first of all, you have to be over 21 to get one. You have to be a Vermont resident to get one. And no single entity can have more than 2 permits. So you could have 2 retail outlets. You could be a cultivator and have a retail outlet. But you could not have 3 retail outlets and 5 cultivator permits. 2. That's what we're suggesting right now, to keep it small.
Basically, I think what everyone wants is to not get pushed out of what already exists. And we're going to scream about it, even if you're not saying that that's what's going to happen. You gotta expect that, because we're all quite aware that big money is stealing what we've been persecuted for creating. And people have this illusion of power, like, we're gonna make marijuana illegal. Well, that worked really well, you know? So now people are gonna legalize it and then dictate to us what illegality is, which could imprison the plant more or push. Now that, right now, where it stands, no one can, well, people tell me I can't do it, but, you know, what are you gonna do? Once you legalize it, I can get pushed out of something that I'm passionate about. And if legalization doesn't happen the right way, then just like Colorado, it's like people are gonna have the illusion that they can make marijuana illegal or they can legalize it under a certain framework. But if they don't respect the will of the people, and people get pushed out, and people are just going to do what they do.
That's why we need people to weigh in on details, because we understand that, and our committee felt very strongly about that point. But we need details, because if we're going to pass a piece of legislation, we need suggestions on the details of how to do that, not the broad concept of keeping it local and making sure that people don't get pushed out of it.
Well, one detail, like some people are talking about allowing a grow space rather than a number of plants. Because if you tell me I can have 2 plants, you know, then that limits what kind of medicine I can have. If you tell me I can have a grow space, then I can have any type of medicine I want, fill it with a wide variety. You tell me I can have 2 plants, and I'm going to grow 2 2-pound plants.
Yeah. I happen to agree with the canopy proposal. It came from some very respected people who came to our committee and suggested it. And I think that at that point, the committee was not ready because they hadn't heard enough about it. But I think as we get more information about what that really means, I mean, they're going, oh my God, oh my God. You have to remember that we're a citizen legislature, and so we have to listen to all of you. But I do like the canopy idea, and I'm going to promote that in my committee.
Thank you.
Yeah. A question, Jeanette. What do you think the possibility of legalization, or when do you think that there might be a possibility that it could pass the legislature? Because my concern is not the details. My concern is the economic driver. And you've all spoken about what the production of marijuana produces in the economy. And I'm as interested in that, but I'm far more interested in what the legalization can do for the whole economic driver of the state.
Yep.
And if we're behind Maine, and we're behind New Hampshire, and we're behind Connecticut, it will still be wonderful for us here in the state, but it won't be the economic engine that brings younger people here, that allows local businesses to grow. And so I guess my question to you is, what do you think the chances are that we will legalize in this next legislative session?
Well, never try to pin a politician down, but I don't think you were here when I originally said that our goal is to have a bill ready January 3rd or 4th or whatever the day that is we go back into session, so that it'll hit the floor then, to get it through the Senate, through the House, and on the governor's desk by the end of April.
And also, I just want to mention, it's going to take 12 months to get the rules and regs
Yeah.
going. And one of the things we've been talking about is a business plan, if you will, year 1, year 2, year 3. Anyone who's in their own business, whatever it is, you know, everything doesn't happen at once. And that's something that we are modeling, and we hope to influence our lawmakers in how it's constructed. So it's going to take time, and we're growing and learning, and that's the exciting thing about this. You can use everything that you guys know, the local growers, everything that our doctors know at UVM, because what the owner of EPA, I'm not commenting on the product because I don't know it, but he is a doctor at UVM. He's starting to educate other doctors. I know that someone here has a husband who's a doctor. We want our research institutions to support this industry, just like we want our educational system to support this industry without pushing people out. But it's very important for our young people, and we walk the streets a little bit in this town, and I see tons of young people that could really, you know, become entrepreneurs and see a future for themselves, bring economic prosperity to their communities, like this young man who wants to bring their children into the state. And I want to say one other thing, that the Vermont Cannabis Collaborative, from the first question that was asked, how do we deal with our youth? How do we educate them on the model of alcohol education, on a health model like how we did cigarettes? Our state is very well versed in that. So there's nothing here about anything but regulation, quality, and access. And that's what we're trying to do.
Just one follow-up to that. If we don't do it in 2016, we will A, have lost a big opportunity, B, be behind the wave of opportunity, and C, be ashamed of ourselves.
Well, that's how I feel about it. So the second part of the question then, and you may have addressed it before I walked in, is are there specific areas that we could help through testimony, through petitions, through activism? And if we could be specific about that, then I think it's a lot easier for us to be active.
In terms of the political reality of it, yes, you can. I think that with probably a couple exceptions, Windham County legislators are probably there. But if you've got friends in other parts of the state, what you need to do is you need to find out where those people stand. And the first group is the Senate, because it's going to be a Senate bill, so it's going to come through the Senate first, and we need to get it passed out of there quickly so that the House can take the testimony. So yes, you can do that, and appeal to
Common sense.
common sense, but I didn't mean to. I think that the more we can appeal to, and I hate to say this, but I think that the conservatives among us, the better, the easier it will be to get it passed.
Well, I've heard job creator like 20 times
yes,
today, so that's a start.
That's a start right there. And I think that one of the things that we've found is that with kids, and I think this is important, when the Department of Health did their, what do you call that, you know what it is, it's the needs, the self, they do, the what?
Youth risk behavior
yes,
survey.
youth risk behavior survey, thank you. When they came in and testified to us, one of the things they found was that more kids are smoking marijuana than are drinking right now. And the reason is because it's easy to get. Alcohol is harder to get than marijuana because we regulate alcohol. So if we can regulate it in the same way that we do alcohol for kids under 21, then there are going to be less kids smoking it. And the other thing is that we've made a huge impact, the Department of Health told us, around drink responsibly, have a driver when you go out, all that kind of stuff. They can't do an educational program around smoking marijuana because it's illegal. But if it's legal, they can do an educational program around it. So
I have one request for feedback, if I might. there's been some people who suggested that maybe, you know, the process of building momentum at town meeting day for different kinds of issues. Is this an issue that could be brought to town meeting because the timing is pretty interesting.
No, it's too late.
It's way too late.
Way too late.
And
But may I just mention something, because we want your energy, we want your voice, and VTCC will be developing communication and media and all that stuff. You're connected. Hopefully people have the courage to sign. We're all friends. We want to get the word out. We want to get the petitions. We're also raising funds because we have expenses, and we'll hopefully do a Kickstarter campaign. We will be activating those who are engaged in what you talked about, which is the economic driver, and that's really our mission, our base, our foundation.
Can I just introduce two other legislators who just came in? Becca Valent is in the back here. She's our other senator. And Tristan Tolino is here. He's one of the 3 reps from Brattleboro.
Could you just, because I'll have to leave to go to a Democratic County committee, and I've got state committees coming up. We're listing in our delegation who's supports this and who isn't. Can you give us a cast of the characters quickly before I go to the county meeting?
Who
You said most of our delegation.
My guess, I don't know about Mike Heber. I don't know where, let's see, Mike, Carolyn, Matt Treber. I think, I don't know. But my guess is that the majority of the Windham County legislators is in favor of it if it's done right.
Can we ask that question, Senator Blake? Do you support it?
Jeanette, I talked about this quite a bit, as long as it's done right. I don't want to rush something through.
What's done right, please?
I'm sorry?
What does done right mean, please?
We need to have an IDA prevention, and it has to be from it involved in the beginning. The prevention community needs to be able to get behind it.
And I heard
I'd like to respectfully take issue with the idea, maybe I've misinterpreted, that everybody would have a level playing field in terms of home growers or small farmers or whatever you want to call them. I already have trouble competing with somebody who's married, let's say, or has kids, much less somebody who's owned a farm for several generations. And they already have a farm stand, they have a whole distribution set up. And yeah, what if I'm not an entrepreneur like Mr. Rapp? It's not equal, and unless the small growers, whether you want to call them home growers who want retail, or small farms or something like that, can have equal access to some kind of distribution system to get them on the shelf, they'll never make it.
Cooperative.
Well, I don't think that the legislation would prohibit a retailer from buying from anybody. We're not talking about a distribution system like we have for beer and wine and alcohol, where you have, you can only buy what's in the Vermont liquor store, and you can only get what your distributors. You can't get Putney wine in certain places because the distributor doesn't carry it. I don't think that, we're not talking about
No,
that.
I'm talking about when the farmer of whatever size plot harvests and has harvest to sell. It would be helpful if there was some kind of cooperative, let's say, and if the burden is entirely on, small farmers to organize that themselves, then I'm afraid what will happen is that the so-called small farmers, who have multiple employees and processing, mortgage, whatever, different situation, and the really, really, really small farmers are going to have, a real competitive advantage that's going to prevent others from being able to.
So here's just a brainstorm idea. In the Intervale, we started the Intervale Food Hub. We have 50 farms now that aggregate. In January, we come together and we say, we need 500 pounds of radishes, who would like to, so we distribute and some farmers say, that's my entire crop. Others say, that's 1% of my crop. They can participate in this food hub, which is a cooperative aggregation. It might be that a Vermont way is not a wholesaler, it's a distribution cooperative that we might be able to build on. Then we can sort of piggyback on some of the things that have happened in dairy and some of the things that have happened in maple. I like that idea a lot.
Research, all of that.
Yeah.
I can tell you that it's real cheap to run a gas chromatograph, and all you do is flip the switch if you're worried about quality. Because I test mine pretty darn regularly.
Right.
And you'd have equal footing and equal access to something like that if you were worried about it. I don't have connections.
Right, I hear, but if there were a hub, so to speak,
Yeah.
that could centralize the testing for somebody who doesn't want to buy a gas chromatograph.
You don't have to.
Actually, the dispensaries would be perfect for that. because
Yeah,
they've
well,
already got-
Excuse me, we just have someone's been
Yeah.
trying to get a call. Yep, go ahead.
First off, thank you, Senator, for doing this. I think this is a great step, and we've been doing this for a long time. And I'm sure just about everybody in this room.
Last time I was here doing this, you were the one in charge.
Yes.
Then I was standing there in this camera, so.
And the reason I am no longer doing that is, one of the reasons is I am a pot smoker, and I had a really hard time serving the legislature and being a pot smoker because it was bugging me. So I have a personal reason for doing this, but my point was, there's 50 of us here, we're all gonna have different ways we wanna see this done. There's two things that I'd like to say. Number one, when they get started, we have to be there, we have to show our support. Number two, and I don't want it to be done haphazardly, I don't believe we would do that, but we gotta do something soon, because they're gonna go back to the legislature next year, they're gonna probably have to cut again, and you know who's gonna get cut, everybody? The vulnerable citizens of this state, okay? So let's put $100 million into the state coffers, approximately, let's just say, because you get about 80 million through cigarette tax. So let's put $100 million into the thing, let's take care of our vulnerable citizens, let's get this program off the ground, and let's stop making me a criminal. That's what I think.
I have a question that hasn't been an issue that hasn't been brought up at all yet, and that's security. One of the things that I worry about being a grower are not the police or the laws, because I have a card and so forth, but people that want to come up and rip me off. And I understand that if you're growing pot and you have a weapon on the premises, that you can go to jail for that. Is that true?
Yes.
Yes.
I would guess.
If you're charged federally, the state of Vermont does not bother people.
So if you're a medical card holder?
Yes.
Yes.
If you are.
I've already had somebody trying, I'm alone at home every day in a wheelchair. I can't get out of my wheelchair. And anybody can come up to my home and break in. I've already had someone try that while I was home. But I can't arm myself. And the other thing that I have to worry about is bears. We had one in the backyard this May. Came right to the back door.
I'm not sure I can do anything about it. Send the governor after them?
I don't like shooting bears or anything else, but if one tries to get in my house, what am I supposed to do? Throw my marijuana plant at it?
I don't know about the bears, and I don't think there is really anything we can do about the possession, because it is a federal law that if you have illegal drugs, and they still would be illegal federally, that you cannot have a weapon, or if you've been convicted of any kind of a felony, you can't have a weapon.
So since it's still illegal federally, if I have a weapon at home and I'm growing marijuana,
you can have a weapon at home. I just don't think you can.
The state of Vermont does not care. The odds of a federal
We're not gonna. The state is.
Actually, technically, you're allowed to fire a firearm, just not own one.
Well, I'm just wondering if the laws concerning the legalization of marijuana in this state are going to address that issue.
Can't, it's a federal.
It's a federal.
Well, that's a federal.
We have a couple more questions.
Federal.
Okay. This piece of
Okay.
I just wanted to, I didn't read the RAND Corporation report, but I'm looking at the creative part. And I'm wondering, you know, I have children, I live in Brattleboro, pay taxes and all that. And when I think about a plot versus plants, first of all, I think a plot forces people to be creative, and bio-intensive and biodynamic farming makes you much more creative, I think. I think that's a good skill if we're going to talk about what we cultivate. And then I also wonder about, I hear growers saying that they can't get, patients can't get it from the dispensaries. What about, I mean, because we have a heroin problem in Vermont that people have talked about, those aren't poppies growing in Vermont. What about only Vermont residents growing? And you can pay your taxes to this centralized location, so anyone who comes to Vermont knows they're buying Vermont, grown in Vermont.
You can only, I mean, we're going to legalize it in Vermont. Nobody else, you can't grow it anywhere else.
Yeah, but I mean, I'm talking if you come from out of state.
You're saying you have to be a resident.
We're suggesting that you would have to be a resident.
So if like maybe like a Cabot cheese, I don't know exactly how that works, but if growers can bring to the dispensary and you have someone testing it who knows what they're doing.
Well, you have two systems. You have medical marijuana and you have recreational.
Yeah.
And we're talking about the legalization and regulation of recreational marijuana.
Yeah.
So
I think that could
how
the same way.
that gets distributed and picked up from the cultivators is going to be one of those creative solutions.
Yeah, you know, I think as Vermont, you know, 50 states, each state is supposed to do their best to be the most innovative and creative. So I think we can improve upon Colorado and take it to the next step.
We can definitely improve upon Colorado.
Small state, we should be able to.
You know, one of the things that just occurs to me is that, because we're getting back to this distribution question, and you call them wholesalers, but if we call them cooperative distributors, but we also maybe could say there's X number of those spread around the state that are authorized to be your cooperative distributor. So they are essentially supporting the aggregation and the testing and quality assurance of the product for then distribution into that region. So then you've been localized at another step.
One of the things that we did not talk about was limiting the number of permits, but limiting the size of a permit that you can have. But we felt that the market will limit the number of permits that are out there, and that we didn't see any reason why we should say there should be so many permits, because if you do that, then you do stand the chance of cutting out, for cultivators. It might be different for retailers, that you might want to limit the number of retailers, but not cultivators.
The market limits the amount of growers.
Right.
So you don't really have to.
Right, that's what I said.
If I'm no good at it, then
Right.
I'm going to go out of business.
Right, exactly. That's what the conclusion that we came to. But we might want to limit the number of retail outlets.
Why?
Well, we may not. We may not. I don't know if we want to or not.
Isn't there the effort to try to get the supply and demand in balance has to do with creating a price that's good enough for someone to make a living, but also takes out the underground market.
Right.
So, I don't know, supply and demand management is an interesting question.
It is.
I want to respond to the gentleman who's saying, hey, what happens if I'm growing marijuana and I also own a gun? If the feds, who knows how politics may change in future years or whatever, the feds may want to raid us. Well, we're still in America with the Constitution, the right of people to keep their arms shut up in a fridge. I don't know how the law works in the real world, but somewhere in the law, if you put a clause saying, and if the federal people come in here and violate the Constitution, they're saying they can't hold guns, then Vermont law enforcement officers shall not be required to comply with the unconstitutional law. It's something like that.
We already don't comply. But the feds have told us that they're not going to bother anybody with plots under 100 acres.
Yeah, but
I know. We're trying to
I doubt Chris Christie's going to be the president, but he's already said, if he is, he's going to crack down on Washington and Colorado.
Maybe-
We don't know how the rest of these guys feel.
If we can all get bad haircuts, maybe not.
Here, read an article that basically all that.
And then here?
They're all against it?
So,
Yeah, I'm not sure.
Hello?
One thing I just wanted to add is that we need to be careful by saying, market forces shouldn't be able to set a bottom, or should be able to set a bottom, so it's all inclusive economy, and then saying there should be no upper limit because of market. No, that's just a heard
Okay.
conversation.
Yeah.
The big question I had was, in terms of equal opportunity in this new economic industry, the way I've seen it, venture capital flows almost exclusively into Burlington, and I was wondering how permitting or licensing geographically located in this industry will help spread out some of, I'm assuming the venture capital that'll come into Vermont.
Well, one of the things on capital, I would encourage that we try to figure out how ownership is only made available to Vermonters.
Yes.
And maybe, in Colorado, you have to be a Colorado resident to be an investor in a cannabis business.
I'm talking explicitly Southern Vermont. I totally
Right.
understand that.
So that's
Vermont only, but in terms of making sure that all of this economic development isn't only limited to Burlington.
Well, if we don't limit the number of cultivator permits, then every single one of you here can apply for a cultivator permit. If you go out of business, that's because you didn't have a good business plan, but you could have a permit. If we do limit the number of retail outlets, we would make sure they were geographically distributed so that you don't have 40 retail outlets in Burlington and none in Brattleboro. That if we limit the number of the permits of any type, they will be geographically distributed.
But that idea of the wholesaler or cooperative distributor being a regionally based thing could also help assure the success of regional hubs.
The point I wanted to make about this exact point, of this exact situation, is that the price of cannabis is going to drop precipitously. Right now, at $250 to $300 is your retail on the parallel market here in Vermont. In Maine, it's $1.25 to $1.60 approximately, from what I've heard. And the dispensaries are around $400 an ounce. So with your cooperative idea, although it sounds very good, I think that there ought to be some way to allow somebody, some small grower like that fellow that can't get all that and doesn't have the family to run it. He's got a local in. This guy that took out his liquor bar, he put it in a cannabis bar all of a sudden. Okay, all the cannabis customers. Well, then he's got a local in. You're not going to allow them. You're not going to allow them to sell in an inn. You're not going to allow a retail operation in an inn as you would with liquor to sell them over the counter, nothing like that.
We do not have that in the regulations at this point. We've decided that that's, what you have to understand here is that we have to craft a bill that meets the needs of people who are currently growing or using and want to have some economic, some job growth out of it. But we have to craft it in a way that will pass 16 people in the Senate, 76 people in the House. And if we opened it all up, it would not pass. And I believe that cafes or bars or whatever you want to call them, smoke houses.
Didn't David's bill have
A lounge.
Yes, but David's bill is not going anywhere.
I understand that, but that was in his bill, and that's what I'm reflecting
Yeah.
on. My point simply is that the small grower will be able to make that living if you don't have to go through that middleman to get to the final sale. Once you're doing a wholesale price on this, and you're not able to take it to that retailer, you may have a problem with that person actually being able to make a living because the price of this material is going to drop like a stone.
In our proposed regulations, the grower can sell directly to the retailer. You don't have to go through a middle person at all. The only reason we even put a middle person in there is because, like I said before, the four of us are growers, but the last thing I want to do is load it up in my car and bring it to your retail shop. I don't want to do that, but he can get a permit to be that distribution network, whether it's him personally or a cooperative or how that happens, but the cultivator will be able to sell directly to the retailer.
If he has a license.
Yeah,
Or
yeah.
he can be the retailer.
He can have two licenses, but he has to sell to the if any money changes hands, there has to be.
Can he grow and sell directly to the public if he has to test
No.
and it's organic?
No, he cannot sell.
Someone who
directly
hasn't asked a
except
question
through
before? Any? So
Well,
just,
here,
just
these two.
these two, yeah.
We haven't talked about the driving and being stopped issue yet. How is that going to get tested and how is it possible to get tested? And I've heard some horror stories about nanograms in your bloodstream, in which case all of us in this can't even drive home right now, so.
I think that there are a couple things happening. For one, I think that there are, a certain entrepreneur in this room, and I decided that we could surely find some smart college student to come up with a system that would do that, and we'd make a fortune on it, right? But what we found out was that Philip Morris was already developing that. They're not called Philip Morris anymore, but the big companies are already developing that, and it will test not the 30-day residue, but whatever is there that impairs you at that level. And for the time being, all we can do is say driving, if you're impaired, is illegal regardless of what you're impaired with, and they're not going to do a urine test or anything else on every single person they stop. If they think you're impaired, we have these people now, and I know a lot of people don't like them, but they're called drug recognition experts, and they actually are trained, and they're getting more sophisticated about when a person is impaired, not when they have something in their system, but when they're impaired. So that's what we're going to have to go with for now.
Is that going to be written into the law, or is that just going to be up to?
Well, that'll be in there that you can't drive if you're impaired.
Excuse me, I have a couple of statements. One is that I want to thank Jeanette for taking testimony and opening up to all of us. We were able to go up and speak our mind. What I like what I'm hearing, that you're not closing out native Vermonters growing locally, artisanally, and not losing a lot of the knowledge that we have here with unique strains that can be vehicles to be used to deliver other drugs that our bodies can't tolerate. And what I really appreciate is that you keep it open to all Vermonters. And I like the idea that there are systems that there will be co-ops possibly for distribution, like what you were saying, where if I don't want to, I want to grow it because I love the act of growing things, but I don't want to distribute it. And it would be like maybe Black River Produce, which is local, that deals with a lot of local farmers, and they would be the distributor, they would get a license, and that the fees would be accessible and not prohibitive, because there is this huge group of people that can't speak, as we've talked about before, and they're not criminals. And to decriminalize it would bring income into our state and also make this a true craft, which is, what we do in Vermont. We grow incredible quality products. And I don't think, as you brought up, we don't have to reinvent the wheel. We've got a lot of these programs and rules already in position. I mean, whether you're baking or growing, we've got all these different licenses that are already there, and we just have to tweak different things, but we don't have to get another huge structure that has to handle all of these regs. So I want to thank you guys, and also if we sign the list, if you can keep us abreast of things that are happening in meetings so that we can continue to participate and be that it can be a true Vermont representation. So thank you.
Sitting by the, did you have your hand up?
I
have a question. I think you might have addressed this already.
Speak up.
Yeah, it's thinking right now, is there, does all retail sales have to, in the structure you propose, have to go through like a storefront retailer? Or like, you know, can the guy who's going over to his buddy's house, can like that person be a retailer?
No, the way we've structured it is that you can have your own personal use. You could give some to your buddy if you wanted to, but you can't sell it to him. And you can't sell it to your buddy's friend. And then you can get a permit to be a cultivator, which means that then you can sell, but you have to sell it to a retailer. You can't, no hand-to-hand sales.
Okay, so this is going to be like a licensed store?
A licensed store. Yep.
You guys mentioned earlier that you were looking at having 2 possible permits per.
That's what we're looking at.
Right, no, but, and that was, is that like 2 cultivating permits and 2 retail?
No, it's a.
Or if you could have a retail and a cultivating.
It's 2 of any combination, but only 2. So you could have a retail and a wholesaler. You could have 2 cultivators. You could have whatever, but you couldn't have 2 cultivators, 2 retails, 2 distributions.
Is that per person or per household?
This is per entity.
Business per business entity.
Per business entity. This is a business. This is a business. This isn't for your personal growth.
So
I realize that, but I'm saying that if I, for example, have my plots, what about my husband?
Well, then you have to have 2 separate businesses.
That's fine. I just need clarification. Thank you.
I beg you guys to consider pondering, like you said, if you're a grower and you produce, you might not feel comfortable transporting, going to the store and selling, and it'd be nice if someone would do that. And there's a lot of people who want access but don't want to go to a store. They don't feel comfortable, they don't want to see people, they don't want stigma, whatever, but it would be nice if you considered leaving it open to people being creative. If I had a large amount of marijuana and I had a storefront, I would think that my security risks are much higher than if I have some undisclosed, safe with it secure and then I'm delivering to someone's house. I would feel much safer.
Well, we did allow for, delivery for dispensaries now, and there could possibly be a delivery thing.
Just leave it more open, and
but
the thing is,
but you still have to have a permit to be a retailer.
Right. But the thing is, the black market, to whatever degree, is going to exist based on the laws. So people are gonna, some population are gonna still be operating underground. But so I don't see how me delivering it to someone makes it more susceptible to me not following the law.
I mean, that's
so I would just beg you to consider all these options, so that it makes it easier for people to think of creative ways to set up businesses and niches to be successful.
Yep, that's a good point. I do want to point out that price isn't the only reason people would buy it legally as opposed to illegally. If you buy it from a legitimate source, you know what you're getting, you know what's in it, you know that there aren't pesticides on it, you know that it isn't mixed with rat poison, whatever it is, you know you're not getting all little seeds and stems. So there are other reasons other than just, and for somebody who does buy it illegally, they're still operating outside of the law and they're not protected. So.
Last question.
Last question?
Oh, is it that time?
Quick question.
Yeah.
How are you going to, if the price drops for legal and the dispensaries, the medical dispensaries are still in business and patients need whatever, of course they could purchase retail or whatever. I'm just kind of unclear on how the dispensary model continues to work on this, and I guess my bigger question is making sure that high quality, consistent marijuana is available for medical patients. So they're not paying more. And in fact, I think the legal market is helping pay for high-priced medicine for people who need it.
I think that dovetailing those two together, the medical and the recreational, is something that is going to take a lot of work, and we need to be very careful doing that.
But also there's a tax policy, at least in other states, where medical is taxed less, so it remains a lower cost than recreational.
So if you signed up here, you'll be kept aware of things that are happening, and that isn't my list, but I will make sure that any updates or anything, any dates or anything like that, get both to the Vermont Cannabis Collaborative and to Stuart, because he has a little list of his own, and I'll make sure that anything, when we set a date and anything that's happening, and I don't know if you want to continue to get comments, but you can always send comments to my legislative email, and I put them all in this little folder and then read them and pay attention to them.
Can I ask you one final question?
Sure.
You have to make the sausage now.
Yes.
Right? And as you see all of the good input from gatherings like this, from your own committee testimony work, you then have to figure out how you can put something forward that's actually going to go somewhere. Do you see the path forward? Or can you imagine achieving many of these goals and also delivering an acceptable bill?
Yes.